I would. Everybody, it's Wednesday at 7 o'clock here in Manchester, and welcome to the Progress Report. Bob Backus, your usual host, is not here. He's up enjoying some quality time with family in the great state of Maine. I envy him. Maine's a nice place to be, especially with the weather we've been having this week, but he'll be back next week. In the meantime, I'm Mike Farley. I'm here to sit in for Bob, and we have a great show lined up. It's going to be freewheeling and wide-ranging. But before we get to that, as our regular viewers may know, we have a regular feature that we've been starting the show off with since January, and that's called the POTUS Report on the Progress Report, and we have another edition of that to start the show off with today. If you've been watching the show, you've been probably hearing me say that I think I have a story for the POTUS Report, and then things change, and then right up to the hour the show begins, something new happens, and I've usually got to change my story. But for this one, we're going to go back a week. We're going to go back to last Thursday. This occurred right after our show aired last week. And it's a quote from the president. "I won New Hampshire because it's a drug-infested den." That's what President Trump said to Mexican President Peña Nieto 6 days into his presidency. We're just hearing about it, but this occurred last January. And that was the same phone call in which he begged President Peña Nieto to avoid publicly saying that Mexico would not pay for his infamous wall, using this high-level discussion to promote his personal political prestige rather than the interests of the nation. Transcripts of the call revealing the disgusting comment about the Granite State were released last Thursday, as I said, about a week ago. Now, we'll probably be discussing the comment further along the show tonight, but I want to focus on the New Hampshire response. That's my focus here tonight. We are fortunate to have an all-Democratic congressional delegation, which incidentally is also all-female, and they were swift to condemn the statement in no uncertain terms. Senators Shaheen and Hassan and Congresswomen Shea Porter and Custer all reacted passionately to defend our state. Our Republican leaders, including our governor and our mayor, as well as two aldermen who were very strong Trump supporters during the election campaign, well, not so much. In fact, State Rep Al Baldessaro, who makes Londonderry proud every single day of the week, even publicly agreed with the gross mischaracterization of our home state. Many Republicans have attempted to change the subject, arguing that the transcripts should not have been leaked. But be that as it may, I remember when the hacked emails from the DNC and the Clinton campaign were being leaked to the press. When the shoe was on the other foot, it was, "Never mind how we know, it's important that we know." Well, we know. New Hampshire voters need to remember this and hold those Trumpist Republicans accountable come election time. And I would say that we need to include among those our mayor, our current mayor who's running for re-election. They've made their choice politically, and now they have to live with it. And it really was. It was a disgusting statement. It was an untrue statement. And we'll talk a little bit later on in the show as to some other components of that very important issue. But before we do that, I want to welcome our guest. You've seen her here before, the incomparable, inimitable, irrepressible Arnie Arnesen. Thank you for coming down from Concord to join us.
It's a pleasure. So much is happening. I mean, every week so much is happening. I can't even say that anymore because I don't sleep at night.
It's hard to keep up. I've characterized it as trying to sip from a fire hose.
Yeah.
We heard one of my favorite quotes was John McCain, who said it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop with a centipede, which I really thought that was a good characterization. But I'm really happy to have you here because I've got a lot of pent up desire to just. There's so much to talk about, and we've tried to focus our show over the past 6 months, but maybe today we can kind of let loose a little bit and talk about a wide range of current affairs.
Well, obviously, I think the sort of the North Korea story is so front and center right now, and it's why I'm not sleeping. I'm really not sleeping.
That was a really scary comment.
Well, and so let me just share what I do on my my radio show is every day I pick out some interesting tweets, and I have my tweets of the day that I pick out. And I realized today that the 3 that I picked out were kind of thematic, all right? So can I share them with you?
Sure, please do.
John Nichols of The Nation magazine, this is his tweet. He tweets, Donald Trump once fretted about nuclear weapons in the hands of crazy and incompetent leaders. It was a prescient concern. George Takei, when the Chinese have to tell the U.S. to tone down the rhetoric, we've really gone into crazy land. And then this is important, everyone. This is by Hallie Bird. A frustrated House GOP aide just now said, we're going to get to December and not have done anything except nuke North Korea. All right?
That's a frightening proposition. I can't see that as something anyone would look upon as a good thing.
Well, it's not only there are no good things with North Korea. There are no good things.
It's
with
a
North
tough
Korea.
spot.
It's a very, very difficult spot. I know that there was this universal support for condemning North Korea and putting limits on trade and put up trade barriers to North Korea. But I think there's something we need to also be aware of. Up until what Russia and China agreed to with the rest of the world, with the sanctions, what we've seen since January is that Russia has begun to send more and more aid to North Korea. So how convenient that in August they say yes to sanctions, but if you look at the amount of support they've been giving North Korea in January, in February, in March, it's almost like they stockpile. Okay, so now they look like, we're voting with you.
We'll stop
but
now,
I think what people have to start looking back is, what did they do up until that point in time? And is this a real vote? Or is this and this is where we are so vulnerable, because China actually wants to they don't want to embrace North Korea. They don't want North Korea to basically be demilitarized, because they don't want to see a North Korea and a South Korea that's merged. They're really afraid. That's their concern. So in a lot of ways, they kind of like this sort of crazy status quo. But I think even they're a little bit alarmed, because this is sort of crazy squared, because he's not like his father, which is what makes people so afraid. You had an understanding of the father. Nobody has any understanding of the son.
Not yet, anyway.
And to a large extent, that's a little bit how I feel about our president. I don't understand him. And are they playing good cop, bad cop, where he gets up supposedly to be talking about the opioid crisis, and then he riffs about, basically bringing all this sort of, power against North Korea, things that you will have, what is the exact language?
It was pretty apocalyptic language.
Very apocalyptic language. And people in Europe and in China were like, wait a minute, where does this come from? And he was not supposed to be talking about this. This was off script.
That's been revealed that it was extemporaneous. It was
totally extemporaneous. They had a script in front of him. He was supposed to be talking about the opioid crisis. And all of a sudden, this is how he begins. And everyone in the room, their mouths drop.
I want to get back to talking about what was the goal. Was it a literal statement, or was it said to shake something up? But before we do, we got our first caller. So I want to welcome Jack to the Progress Report. Jack, go ahead. You're live on the Progress Report. What do you have to say?
Hello?
You there, Jack?
Maybe not.
No? Well, call back, Jack, if you'd like. Let's go on. And I do want to talk to... looks like we may have Jack on line, too.
Hello?
Let's try that one again. Live TV, folks. Jack, if you'd like to call back, give us a call back. We'd love to have you. There are some people that have been saying, as his advisors kind of scramble to kind of get on board with the statement, that this may have been directed more to China, may have been directed more to not necessarily to North Korea, as kind of a way to break a logjam, to shake people up so that they would look differently at the problem.
Well, I think one of the rationales I've heard from his press people is that he's speaking in a language that the head of North Korea will understand. They're both bullies. You know, they both like to exaggerate. They both like to sort of beat their chest. And he was basically, I feel like it's like two apes in a room, and they're all going like this. You know what I mean?
That's fine in the schoolyard, but when we're talking international diplomacy with the capability of launching nuclear attacks.
I know. And you have Seoul, and you have Japan, and you have Guam. I mean, all these places, like we're not talking probably Hawaii, we're not probably talking Alaska, we're not talking California, but realize we've always told these people that we have their back.
We're gambling with other people's chips.
Well, exactly. But that's how Donald Trump does everything.
You make a good point.
That's how Donald Trump made his billions. He gambled with other people's chips. So let's remember, this is very thematic for him. What I think is remarkable is not only his statement that shocked so many people, it's the statement that was made today by a former U.S. senator from the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, we talked about that before the show. I'd like. Why don't you go in on that? Let's get started with that. Who's the senator? First,
the senator is Senator Gordon Humphrey.
Now, very conservative.
Oh my God!
Very ultra conservative, more conservative than New Hampshire.
On the spectrum, he was completely here. Okay, yeah. And when I posted his comments on Facebook, I wanted everyone to know Gordon Humphrey bought a radio station in Concord, KXL, I think is the station he bought. And I was actually working.
That's been around a long time. That's
of course.
A well-established radio station.
Right, and I was doing radio on KXL, and I got what I call constructively fired. Now, people said, what does that mean? I said, now remember, this is Arnie talking, right? So Gordon Humphrey did not fire me, but he handed me a 3-page piece of paper. And it was a list of all the topics I could not discuss on his radio station. You know, like religion and politics. I mean, what was left? The weather and baking. I mean, it was like, I looked at this and I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, if you want to stay with us, these are the topics you can't discuss. And ultimately what he was saying is, why don't you leave? All right, yeah. But he couldn't fire me, but he let me fire myself.
Yeah, well, it's like constructive eviction of an apartment. You shut off the heat, you shut off the light. They can't live there. They've got to go.
Basically, he shut down my mouth.
I didn't evict you, but
exactly. So you know that we are not on the same page.
Yeah.
And so when I post something that I am in relatively agreement with, you know that somebody has changed, and it sure as hell ain't me. And in a way, it's not even Gordon Humphrey.
I was going to say, I don't think Gordon Humphrey will have to have changed to say what you're going to read.
And everyone, please forgive me. It's such tiny print that I'm going to have some tough times with it. But I want you to know that Gordon Humphrey sent this note out to every member of our federal delegation. So Annie Custer got it, Carol Shea Porter got it, Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan got it. And this is what he says. President Trump's threat to rain down fire and fury on North Korea is like pouring gasoline on a fire. It's crazy. I'm not editing any of these words. These are his words. Donald Trump is impaired by a serious sick psyche. All right? I mean, he's cutting no slack here. His sick mind and reckless conduct could consume the lives of millions, your point from before. The threat of nuclear war is steeply on the rise. You must not take comfort in the system of checks and balances. The president alone has the authority to launch nuclear weapons. The only restraint being the advice of senior aides and advisors who might be present at the time of the crisis.
Or might not.
Right. And Donald Trump has shown repeated contempt for informed and wise counsel. He is sick of mind, impetuous, arrogant, belligerent, and dangerous. Donald Trump should be relieved of the powers of the presidency at the earliest date. And then he goes on to say, I urge you to support House Bill, I believe it's 1987, the Oversight Commission on Presidential Capacity Act, which would establish a commission to determine whether the president is mentally fit.
Cow.
And have and it also likely representatives, and he goes on and on and on. But ultimately, the point of this with language that is really unbelievable to hear coming out of anyone. I mean, everyone, as upset as everyone is.
These words do not surprise me. There are people that I've spoken to that we've heard on television who have said similar things. But what is very, very surprising is that we have this coming from a very rock-ribbed New Hampshire Republican.
Well, and let me the last line. Donald Trump is seriously sick. He is dangerous. As a citizen, a former U.S. Senator and 12-year member of the Armed Services Committee, I urge you to act quickly at once. This is an emergency. This is how he ends his note. Now, let me remind everyone, Donald Trump was never supported by Gordon Humphrey. In fact, I believe, and this is important for you to know, when Gordon Humphrey was given a choice between Hillary Clinton and Gordon Humphrey, he announced, although he does not like Hillary Clinton, he knew she wasn't dangerous. And this is the choice between dangerous and a Democrat he does not like. He chose the Democrat because he loves his country so much. That is remarkable.
Well, you know, I know that there was a time when Democrats and Republicans alike might vote against their political interest if the country needed it. And we got Jack back. I'm going to try to make these phones work. Let's see if we can make that work. Jack, are you there on line one? We'd love to talk with you. Looks like we're having a problem with the phones. I'm going to try to see. This one looks like it's out. Nope. No, I just lost the call.
Sorry about that, Jack.
Jack, we are trying. I don't know what the issue is.
You can call my cell phone, and I can just play it this way.
Let me just see if it's a volume issue. It doesn't seem to be that. So we'll, the volume's up. We will try again, Jack. If you'd like to try to call back, we'll try to take that call. I'd love to. We love to hear from our.
I want people to understand that.
Let's get back to this.
To have Gordon Humphrey say this. One, I'm not surprised because he was so outraged at what was happening. And I think he's also outraged at his own party, that they are so afraid. And what they're afraid of is obviously the base. And because we have so gerrymandered Congress, especially Congress, I mean, you can't gerrymander a state. So therefore, your U.S. senators are not gerrymandered, but you can't, we did gerrymander Congress, which means that the only election that matters right now in gerrymandered districts is the primary. It's the only election that matters.
Correct. And what you're saying, these districts it's predetermined that if you can win the Republican primary,
you win the
you're going to win the election
exactly.
because these districts are carved out in ways that make
basically,
that inevitable.
They assume a certain outcome. And so the big fear is that in these primaries, usually the more rabid, the more radical tend to show up in the first place. And what they know, even though the numbers are suggesting that Donald Trump's numbers are tanking, they're in their 30s now, but not when it comes to Republicans. When it comes to Republicans,
70, right?
they're between 70 and 80% still. But here's what I learned today, everyone. I love this. I interviewed a political scientist from Emory University. He and two other political scientists decided to do some analysis from 2000 to 2016. And what they started looking at was at people who have self-declared that they are Republicans. And what they have found out is that in the last year, the number of people since the election, and especially now as we're moving into this 2017 craziness, more and more people are not admitting that they're Republicans. So what's happening is Donald Trump is still getting 80% of people that identify as Republicans. Here's the problem. The number of Republicans is shrinking.
That claim to be Republican. And it's kind of mirrors what we were hearing about people who ended up voting for Donald Trump, but when the pollsters would call, they wouldn't admit to it. And
exactly.
I don't know if admit to it's a real fair way to put it, but they wouldn't.
Well, they were angry, and they weren't. They especially given their history, they weren't sure that they should be sort of public about what they were about to do. And there's a distrust of pollsters anyway. But I think what's fascinating is that, and this is what the pollster described to me today. He said, so let's say you wanted to ask people, did you have a good time at a party? And there's 100 people that were invited to the party. But here's what happens. 50 people leave the party. And then you ask the 50 that have stuck around, did you enjoy the party? Here's the problem. The 50 that left, wait a minute, why did they leave? Did they leave because they didn't have a good time? Did they leave because they had to babysit the kids? You don't know about that 50. And that's exactly what's happening with the Republican base, is that people have left. You don't know why. You don't know why they're not identifying as Republicans. But usually when you choose not to identify with the party that's in power, it's because you're unhappy. and a lot of Republicans are unhappy.
And that's a
Not just
real
Gordon
motivator for
It's a
voters.
real motivator. It really
unhappiness.
is. It is.
We're coming up on our break, but I think we may have Jack again. And I
Good luck, Jack.
did some things, and I'm hoping that maybe now the phone's going to work. Jack, can you hear me? I think we got you there.
Jack,
you are live on the Progress Report. Thank you for your patience. If you'd like to make your comment, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, I hope so. I hope it's going through right now.
It's going through.
We can hear you.
My bad with the technology.
I'm a former Army sergeant at E5 that served in Osan Air Force Base in South Korea, and I was actually typing orders to ship all the helicopter pilots to go to Vietnam. I'll tell you, I love Korea, but I'll tell you what everybody it fails to realize. And Trump talks about Americans. Well, what about the people who live in Seoul? Because right now,
25 million.
Issues, and even generals say, even if we defend whatever is going on, there'll be 2 or 3 million people in Seoul, Korea that will die because this idiot is in a conflict with them. I can't believe this, and I was stationed over there, and I just can't believe this. Donald Trump is just as bad as the guy in North Korea. They have super ego problems, and he's got to keep his freaking mouth shut. Because I'll tell you, South Korea is unbelievable. They've defended every time. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But when I see this on TV, I am so distraught. I have friends. I have a friend that adopted 2 Korean children and everything else.
Right.
And I love that country and everything else. And I can't believe. And he talks about Guam. He talks about America. What about the 2 or 3 million people are going to lose their lives in Korea if a war breaks out?
Right.
Well, not to mention the American
anti-craft.
Well,
Anti-craft weapons are going to kill everybody. Thank you.
No, thank you for your call, Jack. I really appreciate it, and he makes a very good point.
And that's what Gordon Humphrey is saying.
If you
Millions
look at a
will
map
die.
of Korea, Seoul and Pyongyang are very, very close together.
Right.
Seoul is under the gun right now, but we do have to take a real quick break. We'll regroup a little bit. I'm glad we got the technology going, folks. We love you to call in. Call in at 640-3091. We'd love to hear your opinion on our topics, and we will be back in just about 30 seconds. Well, welcome back to the Progress Report. Thanks for watching, folks. We want to remind you that this is a call-in show. We've had a little bit of technical difficulty with the phones, but I think those difficulties are fixed. You can call in at 640-3091. We are here with one of our favorite and frequent guests, the incomparable Arnie Arnesen. Thank you again, Arnie, for coming down all the way from Concord to help us here. We're talking about current events, and in particular, we're talking about the president's comments on Korea. Pretty strident comments on Korea. We haven't heard that kind of talk, I don't know if ever.
And in conflict with everyone, his own Secretary of State, his own generals. I mean, people are trying to explain what it is he's doing and where is he getting this information. But.
Well, we do have Mike on the phone. Mike, thanks for calling in. Let's hit that button. Mike, you are live on the Progress Report. Thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
I'm a first-time caller here to the show, but long-time listener. I do
I'm
enjoy
glad you
the
watch.
show.
Glad you watch. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to get this straight though. We're going to blame, it's based on your last caller who just got me going. We're going to blame North Korea right now on Donald Trump.
No.
Is that what we're doing?
No.
No, I don't think.
I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of Donald Trump's, but we're going to try and. I mean, are we that partisan that we're going to blame North Korea right now on Donald Trump?
I can tell you that that's not what we're saying here.
Guys, is hold on. My question to you guys is: this knucklehead has 60 nuclear weapons, supposedly. That chances are he certainly can hit Guam and maybe able to hit Chicago and other spots in the U.S. What would you do?
So can I just say something?
No, that's the good question. Do you wanna stay on and listen, or do you want me to just we'll cut it and let and,
No, I'd
and go?
I'd like to listen. And
Okay,
stay on.
hang in. I mean,
what would you do?
I think that's the big question. I'm going to tell you, I am so glad that I don't have to answer that question, because it really is. The options are very, very limited. As Arnie, I want to hear from you, but I'm going to lay out what I've heard the possibilities are. One, continue to negotiate. And there's a very strong argument. Well, look, that hasn't worked, and look where we are. He's got
Right.
more and more and more and more. This negotiation hasn't worked. So I get that. That's not a good option. Two, military option. We just had a little discussion on the phone with a caller, and I think everybody realizes that while we would win that type of military conflict, it would be a Pyrrhic victory.
An incredible expense.
The South Korean people would suffer, if not Japan and elsewhere, would suffer irreparable, immeasurable harm just because of the situation and the militarization of that region. And I think the third approach was trying to build coalitions to apply more and stronger sanctions, and I thought that's the direction we were going in.
Well, I'd
love your comments too.
There is no good solution to this. There is no good solution to this. He is crazy. He has nuclear weapons. You are absolutely right. So now here's the question that we have, is that as he gets more overt and threatens, he doesn't care about his own people. He doesn't care. I mean, this is the head of North Korea, doesn't care about his own people. He will sacrifice them.
Well, we've seen evidence of that with the way he treats prisoners. But
in an interesting way, Donald Trump has said something very accurate, and that is he needs China to actually be the vehicle for stopping this, because we can't.
But that might be our national interest, but that has not been China's national interest, at least until yesterday.
Given how things are spiraling out of control so quickly, given how quickly they're able to move forward now on their nuclear capacity and their miniaturization and everything else, China now has to worry, because they can't have millions of people dead in Seoul. They can't. That's not going to work for them either. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is that no one is blaming Donald Trump. The question is, what I'm afraid of is then does North Korea do what they call a preemptive strike? Because what they're hearing from Donald Trump is an invitation for him to say, you're threatening me? I'm dropping my bomb. Okay? And that's not what we want to do.
Well,
and I think that's the fear of his verbiage.
They almost immediately came back and made what sounded like a threat on Guam, which is that's, I think 1/3 of the entire territory is a military base.
I feel like this is like
so it was as if they were pushing on that button to see what would happen. So I don't know if there was a red line crossed.
So someone tell me about two bullies in a playground. Mine's bigger than yours. No, mine's bigger than yours. No, mine's bigger than yours. How does it end? I don't know. I don't know. No one is blaming Donald Trump. Here is the problem. Donald Trump is speaking. He's off the reservation when he talks. He hasn't consulted with his generals. Remember, he loves the generals. He loves the generals. But then he also said something else. I'm smarter than them. He's not. He's not smarter than them. And that's my concern. My concern isn't that he caused the problem. My concern is that he doesn't take any advice and counsel. And that's Gordon Humphrey's concern. His concern is nobody talks about this until they've had a conversation with people that really understand it, have been there, understand the psyche of this leader.
And the specific language chosen is worked out by a team. But, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to play devil's advocate.
I know what you're going to say.
These folks argued that that has not worked.
Right.
The professional policymakers, careful language, that has not worked.
And Donald Trump has some
and the
evidence.
argument that he's speaking in a language that Kim can understand, there's some appeal to that.
So, again, I'm going to say something that probably is going to get a lot of my Democrats angry. His language about undocumented workers and illegal immigrants has caused more people now to go back over the border, back to Mexico, back to Latin America. There are fewer people coming across the border because they are so terrified. Now, that's one part of the story. Here's the other part of the story. There are a lot of people now that have come, for example, that come to our academic institutions, that want to go to the University of Iowa, they want to go to the University of New Hampshire, and we're seeing the number of people who want to come to America with a Donald Trump as president, that number is beginning to shrink too. What does that mean? Those people that have come, for example, from China, that have come to our institutions, that's what's keeping our institutions afloat. Because they pay full tuition, they pay full freight, and they are actually sustaining our academic institutions right now that have been starved. We're a perfect example of that in New Hampshire. New Hampshire ranks 50th in state aid to higher education, and if you tripled our state aid, we'd still be 50th. So how is our university maintaining itself? Well, let me introduce you to all those foreign students that are coming, that are now rethinking, why should they come here? Why not go to Australia? Why not go to New Zealand? Why not go to McGill? They're all looking at options because they are afraid of being here. And that's frightening. And I'll give you an example of a story that happened in Maine. So in Maine, there is a little school, an international school for people that want to learn to be midwives, all right? And it's a phenomenal school. People come in from all over the world to learn to be midwives. And it's been very important for that part of Maine, too, because it produces some good jobs. Well, it turns out there was a couple from Belgium, and she was French, and I believe he was maybe Danish. They were in interrelational marriage, whatever. They were going to the school for a couple months. They have been harassed by people in Maine. Why are you here? Are you illegal? Why don't you leave? Now, they are here on a legal visa. They're here to get educated. They are going to go back to their country, but they went to the head of the school and said, we're not staying. If this is the kind of harassment we're going to get, we're not saying, and they're paying money and full freight. And she said, I'm leaving.
As much as I can agree that, first of all, I understand why would they put up with that, and I can understand them leaving, and I can also understand why it doesn't make sense to discourage that kind of academic person coming in. They add to the school, and they take from the school as well. They're paying full boat tuition. But what I want to ask is, who on earth is so rude as to say that to somebody? Well, who on earth, where are our manners?
Where is Donald Trump's manners?
Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is
he's coarsening the
yes, he's coarsening the
language that we talk about.
And because when your number one role model, which is your president of the United States, look what he said to the Boy Scouts. I'm not making this up. This is what he said. No. Everybody was horrified. And every president is always asked the big jamboree. This is not unique. He wasn't the only president to be invited. Other presidents they invite them every single year.
And they talk about leadership and experience.
But that's not what he talked about.
Understood.
And I think when you have that, it gives you. It's kind of like pulling a scab off a wound. And that's exactly what's happened.
We have another caller, Arnie. You get the callers to come in.
The topics are here.
JJ, you're on line one here on the Progress Report. Thanks for calling. What would you like to talk about? Are you there?
Hello, JJ.
Looks like we lost him too. Yeah. Lost that call. Well, JJ, if you'd like to call back, feel free. Please understand it is a live show where we try to finish our thought before we get to the phone calls, but we'll try to pick them up as quick as we can. So I can see what you're saying, but my number one role model has never been the President of the United States. When I was growing up learning manners, it was my parents and my grandparents who were very well-mannered people and tried to instill that in me. And I hope to heck that I wouldn't be so rude as to, in public, harass another person that I didn't even know their circumstances. Where does this gall come from? That's what I don't understand. Is everybody that ticked off?
Well, I think, look, it is the problem with being the other. That's what this is about. So if
we're all the other. We're a nation of immigrants, and we all know it. We celebrate it.
But all right. So there was a report that just came out, everyone, from Bloomberg News. So remember how the economy is coming back, and we see jobs are being created. There's two statistics you need to know. First of all, We are now at the highest credit card debt at any time since even before the crisis. Did you know that?
Oh, it's really.
It
I did not realize it had come back that far.
If the economy is coming back, I know my wealthy brother, he doesn't use credit cards. He doesn't need to because he's sitting on a wad of cash. The people that need credit cards are people like probably you and me that need to figure out how do we get to the end of the month, and we use credit cards. The fact that credit card debt is now higher than it had been at any time even before the crash is a frightening statistic, number one. Number two, here's another interesting. Do you have some on the line?
We got Jay. You
no,
want to hold your thought?
No, I'll hold my thought.
All right, very good. Thank you, Arnie. You're being so kind. Hey, Jay, we got you back on the progress report. Go right ahead.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you guys doing? Jim here.
Jim,
I was
how are you?
listening, and my thought is I think you're giving Donald Trump too much credit for some of the things, because in the end, long before he was elected, we had public representatives in Manchester who were distinguishing between immigrants and refugees, and and in public forums shouting people down and saying you're not an immigrant, you're a refugee. We've had an anti-refugee a group of politicians on both the school board and the board of mayor and aldermen for the last 2 or 3 terms. Mm-hmm. We've had school board members and board members mocking people and mocking their language and their use of language and their accents and etc. So Donald Trump just came along the other day. These people have been slowly working in this swill for a long time.
So Jim, let me just say something though. Here's the problem though. Now they have a megaphone in the President of the United States. There's one thing for this to happen with, in Manchester with some city aldermen, and people could be outraged and upset, and they're going, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? Well, now it's amplified. Now it's coming out of the President of the United States, and now not only is it amplified, but now they feel justified.
It's normalized.
And now it's normalized and justified, and that, I think, is a horrific thing.
So, Arnie, I agree. I agree. I think your point. I was making it. I agree with you, but I think that I have no. I think that a lot of what comes out of President Trump's mouth is abhorrent. But in the end, he is in the end reflecting a group of people in society, and I know he has the megaphone. But if we consider it that during the Obama period of government, for instance, I think many people thought they were beginning to see a post-racial age in the United States, that we sort of moved beyond race, that the gay issue and gay rights was being resolved, and we were reaching a sort of a new day, and when we found out that actually wasn't true, that there's a vast number of people in America, albeit a minority, but a very loud minority, who are still racist, who are still bigoted, who are still xenophobic, who are still angry people about their condition in life. And sadly, America is not the country that I, for instance, thought it was, a year or two ago. But on reflection, I realized that what we did do during the Obama years is that our view of America was rose-tinted. America is not the country we thought it was.
No, I'm going to challenge you on that.
We have a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
Well, your point is well taken, Jim. We'll run with that one. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I think I know where you're going to go with this, because and maybe it kind of answers the question of where this comes from. The idea that Donald Trump is merely reflecting something that was out there. I think there might be something to that, and I think that something might have been what you're going to talk about during the Obama years, where maybe some of us thought that we had gotten to a better place, but there was an undercurrent where it really didn't. And we see that in the obstructionist Senate. Well,
when you see the fact that we have stagnant wages. We have, and I didn't get to the other statistic other than the one about credit cards. So let me just this was just shocking. So they were talking about the number of jobs that were created in the last month, and someone said, "Do you know how they look at jobs? If you work 1 hour a week, you're considered working. Okay, that means you could be like selling things on the internet for 1 hour a week, and you're considered working. It turns out the number of full-time jobs dropped, but the number of part-time jobs increased. All right? Now, if you're angry about stagnant wages, if you're angry that you don't have job stability, if you're upset that you don't have a pension, if you're upset that you can't like take 2 weeks off on vacation because no one who's part-time gets to get a vacation, understand what happened in the last numbers. If you look at the last numbers are not about the kind of economic growth that most Americans want. And that's part of the problem. So we have Wall Street taking us to our knees in 2008. They are roaring back. Wall Street is roaring back. Look at what's happening with the stock market. 50% of Americans don't own one stock.
That rise in the stock market only helps the people who have something in the game. If you don't, they say a rising tide floats all boats, but if you don't have a boat, the rising tide's going to drown you.
My question to Barack Obama is, where was your infrastructure bill? No. I mean, I understand the social issues are the easy ones, all right? Because, you know, a corporate master doesn't care about gay marriage. He just wants to make sure he can sit on his cash, all right? They don't want to be told that they have to. So my problem is that what happened in the 8 years of Barack Obama is that we didn't do the kind of investment in the economy. People blame the other when they see their lives are getting worse. And what Donald Trump did was play to that anger and play to that fear. And what is interesting to me is the Affordable Care Act. When everybody referred to the Affordable Care Act as Obamacare, all those red counties in America hated Obamacare. But here's what they liked. They liked keeping their kid on their health insurance till they were 26. They liked the pre-existing conditions.
Specifics.
They liked all the specifics. And all of a sudden, when the Republicans decided they were going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, people went apoplectic. Because it turns out that they managed to make Obama the other, but what he delivered was what they wanted. He just didn't deliver enough because he played too much to Wall Street. If you look at Mary Jo White, the head of the SEC, Wall Street had a cakewalk with Mary Jo White. She did nothing but wrap their knuckles. The banks are bigger, they're more influential, they can actually control more of this economy. What did Obama do really to add to the constraints of Wall Street? Zippo. What did he do for really investing in the economy? Not quite Zippo, but about there. And if you want to understand why Hillary Clinton lost and Donald Trump won, is he played to that anger, and that was legitimate.
Well, with that, having solved that problem, we're going to take our second break. We're going to regroup, and we will come back for our third segment of the Progress Report in just a few seconds. Thank you for watching. I'll remind you the phone number here is 640-3091. We thank the callers who called in. If you'd like to call in, feel free to do so. We'd love to talk with you. See you in just a few seconds. Can we go back and talk about your letter to the editor on the opioid epidemic? We're only going to have about 15 minutes left, and I'd really like to talk about that. That's important in Manchester.
Yeah, no, it's important everywhere.
Okay, line 1 or 2? Okay, we'll take them, and we're ready whenever you are. And we're back. Thanks for watching, folks. This is the Progress Report for Wednesday here in Manchester. What is the date? The 9th, August 9th here in Manchester. The summer is flying by. We have Jay on the line. Jay, thank you for waiting so patiently for us. We appreciate it. Go right ahead. Thanks for calling. What do you got to say? Are you there, Jay?
You may have to call back.
Let me see if... Jay, is that you over there on line 2?
I hear someone dialing up again, so we may have to ask him. All right.
Well, I think
Jay, call back.
Let's try it again.
I apologize.
Jay, give us another call. It's not you, Arnie. It's the person handling the equipment.
It's John.
Oh, John. I think we got you. Here we.
Oh, John, did you hang up?
No, it's John.
John, hey, how are you? We finally made this happen. Thanks for calling. What's your comment or question on the Progress Report?
Okay. Here's the following countries that Donald Trump's all his products that he's been made. It's China, Bangladesh, Honduras, Vietnam, South Korea, Mexico, India, Taiwan. I think I said Indonesia.
Right.
The the guy says made in America, but him and Ivanka, all the products are made outside the country. So when is he going to bring all these products and made by Americans?
You think he's really going to do that, John?
No.
No.
No. Did you
If
hear?
you study his business practices, he doesn't pay anybody, and then he's shortchanged of anything else. He's had like 500 lawsuits over like 10 years.
Well, here's something more interesting. So you know how he wants to cut legal immigration in this country by half? And he's always sort of ranting and raving about the fact that we can find the workers here, and that's what we need to do. Mar-a-Lago, did you hear about Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, just recently he couldn't get the staff to take care of his summer...
Well, here's the interesting thing. So in order for you to get
the ad you're going to talk...
Yeah. So in order for you to be able to get workers to do the jobs that are fairly menial. I mean, to clean your hotel rooms and to be busboys or whatever.
Kitchen work,
you have to show that you have published an ad that must run like for a couple weeks, and that as a result of that ad, you were not able to get the requisite number of people to come in to work at your hotels or
So
your
the
golf
Mar-a-Lago
courses.
ad is a full-page ad showing what a wonderful place it is to work, inviting anyone from...
He's making it up. Excited about the Mar-a-Lago ad? The Mar-a-Lago ad is about this big. Let's see. You need to get a microscope to be able to read it.
It's literally an in-column want ad.
It's in-column want ad. It's this big. You couldn't find it if you were looking for it. And that is his claim, that he has well publicized his need for workers, and therefore because no Americans were ready, willing, and available to work at at Mar-a-Lago, he can therefore go outside of the country and bring people in. Well, is he being legitimate in what he said? Yes. Was this really what you think you should be doing by this kind of ad? Probably not. And what I've described, and you can go to the letter I think now, is I've described Donald Trump as an authentic liar. And what do I mean by that? There's always a kernel of truth in what he says. It's just so distorted, and it's so surrounded by stuff that is completely not true that it ultimately is a lie. But it sounds so good. Because
it's got a little truthiness in it.
It's got the truthiness in it. And that story about that ad is exactly that. He did what the law required. You need to run an ad. The law didn't realize they needed to say 5 inches by 6 inches on page 2, because what they got from him was 1/2 centimeter by 1/4 centimeter on a page you would never look at. And that's where, when your president is role modeling that kind of behavior and claiming he doesn't like immigrants and he says we should hire Americans, then why did he just do that?
Why do you have to do that?
Right.
Well, I do want to get to a letter to the editor you wrote and change the topic, but we have another caller. I think I lost him. Jay, are you there?
Whoops.
Well, I am having a heck of a problem with this phone.
Call back.
Let's try this one. No, they're both dead.
All right.
Well, without Bob,
I
I need a grown-up in the room
You
to
do,
run this
you do,
desk.
you
I
do.
am really having a hard time with the phones. Guys, thanks for trying.
Keep tweeting.
Well,
That's Donald Trump.
Looks like we have him back. I'm going to
Right.
try that again. Nothing there. Nothing there. So I don't know what to do. I'm trying to. These phones, the lines are open, but I am not getting the callers. So let's.
And if people want the numbers, for example, about the job growth and the part-time jobs, I will provide you with those numbers. It's really, really fascinating. And then one other thing I want to just mention about the jobs, which is really why I think people are still angry, is that you are considered working full-time if you work X number of hours, like 35 hours or whatever the number is. Here's the problem. You could be working 3 part-time jobs to get to those requisite hours, and they count you as both full-time and 3 part-time jobs. Isn't that it? The same person gets counted twice. They get counted for each part-time job, and then because they're working over the 30 or whatever it is hours, they're counted as a full-time job. So talk about double dipping. And this is not Donald Trump. This has been how we've been doing this with the Bureau of Labor Statistics for a long time. I think if you want to trust the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they need to change how they actually evaluate
But they've been doing that a long time,
I know.
and
It's terrible.
It's a statistical analysis that statisticians believe
That
gets you
presidents love.
to the better number.
That's right. That presidents want the big number.
But if
they don't want the real number.
If you're always using the same number, you do have some metrics so you can see one over the other, one against the
Right.
other. But
And yet-
it's not a real number.
It isn't a real number. But still, my point is that what people want is not part-time work. What people want is full-time work. What people want to know is that when they work full-time, they don't have to depend on Section 8 housing or a food stamp check. They want to know that their work is valued. I agree with them. Amen.
And the wage is a living wage. Well, look, we only have a few more minutes left, but I do want to get back to the topic that we kind of started the show with, and that has to do with the opiate and heroin addiction and misuse problem that we're suffering here in New Hampshire and everywhere else. And the way he just really didn't do anything helpful. And I want to start by reading a brief letter to the editor that you wrote to the Concord Monitor, which I think really says it and takes a point of view that I think is very important. And you start with a quote: "I won New Hampshire because New Hampshire is a drug-infested den," quoting the President of the United States. "I describe Trump, and as you said, as an authentic liar. He does it with a passion, and there's usually a kernel of truth in his distortions and lies. Yeah, he won the primary, not the general. New Hampshire does have a drug problem. But all the chest beating and emotional responses from our elected officials failed to reveal the most important fact, the real dirty little secret." And I talked about the responses at the beginning of the show, and you're cutting right through that baloney to get to the real issue here, and I admire the fact that you did it. "Rich New Hampshire, the 7th wealthiest state in the nation, is not a drug-infested den, despite ranking 2nd in opioid-related deaths and 1st for fentanyl-related deaths per capita, that is per person in the state. But we are a treatment desert. New Hampshire has the 2nd lowest rate of spending in the United States on substance use treatment and prevention, so it doesn't provide enough resources for those addicted to opioids to recover. I wonder why we have the problem. Until our elected," quoting again, Arnie, from your letter, "until our elected officials can publicly admit that we are irrationally wedded to the cost of everything and the value of nothing, including the lives of our citizens, we might as well be called a drug-infested den." And you make a point, harsh to listen to, hard to take, but a pretty accurate one. We here in New Hampshire have not historically been willing to spend what it takes on any of the necessities that a state ought to be providing for its citizens, and in particular the treatment beds
and prevention
that we need.
And here's the sad thing, everyone. When John Sununu, not the senator, but the governor, was governor of New Hampshire, we were ranked as one of the best states in the nation for responding to issues like mental health and those kinds of things. We were remarkable. And then it just disintegrated. And the reason why I'm angry at Maggie Hassan, and I'm angry at Jean Shaheen, and I'm angry at Chris Sununu, is that during their watches, not just Chris Sununu, but their watches, we were 2nd from the bottom. That's the problem. So if the situation is getting worse, it's getting worse because
we're doing nothing to stop it.
You can't arrest yourself out of this problem. Everyone knows it. There was a wonderful article. You should get the police chief from Laconia on. He was in the New York Times, and he knows better than anyone. You can't arrest yourself out of this. It isn't the answer. You know, and it's not only that the prevention and treatment is so important. I interviewed a woman from West Virginia, which ranks #1. Okay, in opioid overdoses. We're #2, they're #1. Now remember, West Virginia is really poor. I mean, we're really rich. What's our excuse? But here's the real part of the problem without the prevention and the treatment, is that it's not just about the addict. It's not just the fact that you may have to give them Narcan 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. In Laconia, after the 3rd time, they're not going to do it anymore. They can't afford to do it. What's happening is EMT budgets are being blown out of the water. There are not enough ambulance hours anymore. You know, coroner times is being blown out because the coroners can't keep up with all the dead bodies. But here's the sad part that everyone in New Hampshire needs to face. The woman in West Virginia said, what's happening with the opioid overdoses around the country and the addiction problem, she described it as elder abuse. Now, why did she describe it as elder abuse? Because parents are suddenly being forced to step into the lives of their children, that have marriages. And when they are addicted, and they end up either dying or going into some sort of treatment facility or end up with brain damage, because if Narcan isn't delivered in a timely fashion, they may come back, but they don't come back completely whole. All of a sudden, these older families are suddenly responsible
raising
for
another
children.
generation.
So they're spending their money on the limited treatment that we have in this state because nobody is helping them. And then after they de-asset themselves trying to save their kids, when their kids die or kind of lose it, they're now responsible for the grandchildren. This, everyone, is elder abuse. So look at this problem as a bigger problem. And why I'm angry is, how can we be so rich and not have put the money into prevention and treatment? This didn't happen this year. It was true last year, the year before, 5 years ago, and this is why we're in a situation like we're in. It's going to only get worse until we put those dollars there. And that is, it breaks my heart, is what it does.
Well, it's certainly, I can understand what you're saying. This issue radiates out, and it affects the children, it affects the families, it affects the quality of life in the entire city of Manchester, it affects the quality of life in the state of New Hampshire. It is not a problem that is limited to just those bad people. It affects good people.
Yeah.
And these good people work very hard, and many of them get into treatment. And by the way, treatment includes relapse. That's part of treatment.
That's part of treatment. Thank you.
And you have to, you can't, give them one shot. I shouldn't say the word shot. One opportunity.
Yeah.
And if they relapse, well, they're not salvageable. That is just not factually the case.
But understand how it's draining all the other services. If your fire department is reaching out to someone who's overdosing, they're not there for your fire. If your EMTs are responding to someone that's overdosing, they're not there for someone who's having a heart attack. If they're overdosing in the library and the librarians are being taught how to do Narcan, they're not reading books to your 5-year-old. Understand how this is affecting all of us. This is such an important problem. And I want folks to know that in 2014, the governor of Vermont had a State of the State address. This is 2014. Remember, today is 2017. His entire State of the State address was about the overdose and the opioid crisis in Vermont. Have you ever heard a governor commit an entire State of the State to talk about a drug problem? But as a result of what Governor Shumlin did, they spent millions dealing with prevention and treatment. Are they perfect? No. Are they better than us? By a long shot.
And I think that's measurable, too.
Yeah, it's very measurable.
Well, we have come to the end of a very exciting hour. We didn't touch on many of the things I wanted to talk about. I wanted to go deeper into the president's response to this opioid crisis,
Ignoring
which is no
Chris
response
Christie.
at all.
Right.
But unfortunately, we're out of time.
Well,
so
you.
I want to thank you very much for coming down. I really appreciate it. It was a little bit daunting not having Bob here. I usually need a grown-up in the room to help me with these things, but I think we got through it thanks to the knowledge that you put out. We really learn a lot when you come on, so thanks very much.
I just do something with the knowledge now. That's the challenge.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Yeah. And folks, thank you very much for watching the Progress Report this week. We thank our callers. I'm very sorry to Jay. I guess I just couldn't make it work for you. That's on me. I'm sorry about that. But please, callers, continue to call in, continue to watch the Progress Report. We do it for you guys. We do it for Manchester. So we will be back again next week on Wednesday. If it's Wednesday, it's the Progress Report. Thanks for watching. See you next week, folks.